We begin at a party taking place in a house, where a group photo is taken. Next, an elderly woman named Griselda is seen leaving the party. Later, a young woman named Rosario gazes out the window at the city. Her mother, Elena, who appears to be ill and coughing, asks if her daughter has seen her grandmother and requests that she check her whereabouts. At that moment, her father, Oscar, calls her over and sits her down, asserting that one day all her dreams will come true. They perform a hand gesture and express love for each other. Rosario then decides to look for Griselda. She cautiously walks down the hallway and knocks on a door that slowly opens by itself. Noticing mud on the floor, she pulls back the curtain and sees insects scattered about. She then notices blood on Griselda's shawl and, terrified, begins to back away. Just then, Griselda appears behind her. Rosario turns on the light and glimpses Griselda, who appears suddenly. Rosario asks her to join the family in prayer, but Griselda replies that her beliefs are different. Rosario notices Griselda's bleeding hand, and Griselda calmly instructs her to leave. Meanwhile, Oscar reveals that the occasion is Rosario's first communion and asks everyone to have a moment of silence to remember those who are no longer present. As everyone closes their eyes to pray, Rosario sees Griselda silently walking among the guests, which terrifies her when their eyes meet. In that unexpected moment, the candle in front of Griselda suddenly goes out, and this moment concludes. The scene then shifts to the present, where Rosario, now an adult, receives a call from her grandmother but, after a brief hesitation, chooses to ignore it. Currently working as a successful stockbroker, Rosario is interrupted in the office by Miguel, the security guard, who requests to schedule an investment meeting for himself and his wife. She explains that her company requires clients to meet a minimum limit. At this moment, she receives another call from her grandmother, but again chooses to ignore it. Back in the office, Rosario ignores another call. Later, she receives another call from her grandmother, but this time decides to answer it. The voice heard on the other end is distorted when a man informs her that Griselda has died. Shocked, Rosario asks which hospital they are taking the body to. The man informs her that the weather outside is very bad and asks if anyone present could accompany the body. Rosario mentions that she is alone but insists that she is on her way. In a new call, Rosario phones her father to inform him of the situation. It becomes evident that Elena and Oscar are separated and that Elena, who previously lived with Griselda, is no longer alive. Rosario informs Oscar that she is heading to her grandmother's apartment. Oscar warns her not to go and assures her that he will handle everything. She responds that the weather conditions are terrible and it will take over 3 hours to get there. On the subway, Rosario listens to a voicemail from Griselda in which she pleads for forgiveness. Her voice coughs and distorts, and when she turns around, Rosario sees her sick mother standing at a distance, who suddenly disappears. Terrified, Rosario steps back. Finally, upon reaching her destination, she enters the building, where an elderly man named Marty appears. She asks if the elevator is broken, and he confirms, mentioning the irregular door functions and the strange sounds it makes. Marty offers to accompany her to Griselda's apartment. During the journey, she asks if her grandmother was ill. Marty responds that Griselda was nostalgic and often talked about returning to her homeland. He inquires if she came alone, to which Rosario mentions that her mother passed away a few years ago and that Griselda was the only one left on her mother's side, while her father is on his way. While unlocking the door, Marty mentions Joe, the neighbor. He then opens the door and informs her that he and Joe placed Griselda on the couch and covered her with a sheet, also informing her that the ambulance should arrive soon. Hastily, he blows out some candles, claiming that he just said a prayer, and then leaves Rosario alone with Griselda. Rosario softly cries as she pulls the sheet back. Facing the sight of the body, she becomes frightened. Upon closing her eyes, she notices strange cuts and symbols etched on Griselda's body. Suddenly, she hears the sound of glass breaking and heads to the kitchen, where everything is rotten and infested with insects. She carefully discards the dirty dishes in the trash. Next, she hears the siren of an ambulance outside, and when she waves, the vehicle drives away. Rosario quickly calls emergency services, explains the situation, and mentions that an ambulance just arrived and left, asking if they could request it to return. The operator informs her that the ambulance was diverted to a critical emergency. When she questions if her grandmother's body should simply rot there, the operator responds that they will return in a few hours and ends the call. At this moment, Rosario notices the candles are lit again and decides to extinguish them. As soon as she sits down, a train passes nearby, violently shaking the apartment. Griselda's body falls from the couch, and as the shaking ceases, Rosario drags her grandmother's body into the bedroom. She notices a framed photo of herself on the wall, examines it briefly, and sets it aside. Looking into a mirror, she sees Griselda's head moving. Frightened, she checks the body and notices one of Griselda's nostrils twitching. Suddenly, a worm emerges from it, followed by black liquid. Disgusted, Rosario cleans the area, picks up the worm with a napkin, and tries to dispose of it, but the worm crawls toward her hand. The worm enters her body and begins to crawl up her arm. In a panic, she removes her jacket as the worm approaches her head. In a swift movement, she pulls the worm out of her ear, leaving her deeply frightened. Next, she spots mud on the floor, hesitates to investigate further, and decides to leave. However, moments later, she returns, pulls back a curtain, turns on the light, and finds Griselda's clothes. Behind them, she discovers an animal skull and fresh blood on one of the garments. As she moves the clothes, she finds a locked door marked with a strange symbol. Suddenly, she hears a loud knock. Looking through the peephole, she opens the door and finds Joe. He recognizes her as Rosario, introduces himself as Joe, and informs her that he and Marty moved her grandmother to the sofa. She thanks him and asks if he needs anything. Joe reveals that her grandmother borrowed his electric fryer and needs it back, asking permission to enter. Rosario asserts that if she sees her grandmother, she promises to inform him. Joe insists, but she stands firm and closes the door. He knocks again, and she questions if he needs anything else. He says she should put ice on the burns on her hand. Rosario quickly finds a bandage. While wrapping her hand, she notices a strange symbol etched on Griselda's thigh. Upon examining further, she discovers barbed wire wrapped around her thigh. After carefully removing it, she finds a key hanging. She heads to the door she had seen earlier, unlocks it, and it swings open. When she opens the door, she discovers a black magic altar inside. Cautiously stepping in, she looks around and finds strange and disturbing items. She picks up something resembling a voodoo doll, with the name Cobayende written on it. When she places it back down, she notices a photo of herself. Then she sees something even more horrifying. Her teeth, tufts of hair, and a used pad, presumably for a blood ritual, prompting her to vomit. Just then she detects movement in the background. Rosario hears a faint creaking. Terrified, she decides to investigate, but someone quickly hides. Frightened, she attempts to run, but her face hits the barbed wire. She screams in pain and runs away. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker and then go completely out. Overcome by fear, she decides to flee the building. Before leaving, she leaves a note on the door, informing about a body found in the bedroom. At that moment, Joe arrives and notices Rosario's bloodied face. He asks if she is leaving and mentions the bad weather, then brings up his electric fryer. She ignores him and steps away. Downstairs, Marty is fixing the fuses and warns her about the curfew, but she insists on leaving. With no taxis available, she runs to the subway. In the subway, a man announces that the subway is closed. His dog barks, and in a panic attack, Rosario becomes frantic. The man asks her not to run, but she flees, causing him to let the dog loose to chase her. Rosario manages to escape, but Elena suddenly appears, grabs her arm, slams her head against the subway door, and disappears. The dog grips Rosario's coat, but she slips away and breaks free, running back to the building. Upon re-entering, the fuse box sparks. Rosario begins an online search and discovers Palomaybe, an obscure religion that combines African traditions with Latin American Catholicism, spread through slavery and forced migration. Its practitioners, identified as palajeros, use remains of animals and humans to communicate with spirits through iron cauldrons called portals, essential tools for making deals and casting curses. As she reads, she freezes upon seeing a symbol appear on the screen that represents a mark of life and death associated with the cursed, the same symbol found on her hand. Frightened, she calls her father and mentions that she believes Griselda cursed her before she died. explaining that she found a black magic altar in her apartment. Oscar defends Griselda, asserting that she was not evil but a healer who helped people and that she moved there without documents while her cauldron reconnected her to her roots. He questions why she would curse her. Rosario, in response, argues that Griselda wanted revenge for having turned her back on her and her daughter. She emphasizes that she chose Oscar after the divorce, not being present during her mother's and Griselda's deaths. Oscar reminds her that Rosario was just a child and encourages her to go home, promising to take care of everything. However, Rosario reaffirms her determination, stating that she will not leave until she breaks the curse. Upon seeing Oscar protest, she ends the call. Observing Joe attempting to unlock her grandmother's apartment, she enters and mentions that she wishes he would leave her alone. She returns to the altar and tries to position the cauldron correctly. As she drags it, the chain gets stuck. Suddenly, Elena's ghost appears, holding the chain and crawling toward Rosario. After a confrontation, she manages to forcefully close the altar door. As she locks it, Elena's ghost haunts her from inside, pushing Rosario back. Rosario seeks a way to break the Palo curse, but as she realizes her phone's battery is dying, she slams it against a wooden cabinet and discovers a hollow space behind it. When she lights a candle, she finds a hidden compartment, and inside it, an ancient book. Flipping through the pages, she searches for information on breaking the curse, reading that the blood of the cursed and the blood of the Palo who cast the curse must be poured into the cauldron by which the curse was made. Rosario cleans a knife, sits next to Griselda, and cuts her own finger, allowing her blood to flow into the cauldron. She then attempts to cut Griselda's finger, but no blood comes out. Desperate, she tries to cut her wrist, but again, there is no result. Hesitant, she raises the knife toward Griselda's throat, but hesitates. Just then, her phone vibrates with a call from her grandmother, pleading for forgiveness. The voice distorts, and the call ends. Suddenly and intensely, Elena appears, asking for help after everything she has done for Rosario. Instantly, Rosario stabs the knife into Griselda's hand, causing blood to flow into the cauldron as Elena disappears. The phone vibrates again, and Rosario hears a voice saying it is her grandmother, asking for forgiveness. Distressed, Rosario asks why the curse did not break. Griselda's head falls forward, and suddenly, she haunts Rosario. Rosario squeezes herself under the bed, as ghostly hands scratch her from various sides, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. Next, Elena reappears and declares that Rosario did not want to see her die, and now she must witness her death, vomiting a black sludge onto Rosario. In panic, Rosario escapes. In a new knock at the door, Joe requests his electric fryer. Rosario informs him that her grandmother didn't even use an electric fryer. Joe justifies that she did not know her as he did, leading Rosario to open the door and ask what Joe said about her grandmother, questioning what she would say. Joe hesitates and responds that he does not want to get involved in family matters. But while pleading for answers, he finally reveals that her grandmother loved her and was proud of her, praying incessantly for her success, something he used to hear through the walls. Rosario convinces herself that Griselda did not curse her but made a wish, an agreement that included her. Flipping through the spellbook, she finds a page titled An Agreement with Cobayende. Returning to the altar, she lights the candles and reads a note about Cobayende, described as a wanderer of the shadows and collector of the dead. She understands that once the terms of an agreement are met and the dream is achieved, Cobayende comes to collect, and a scorned spirit torments the beneficiary until death during the daylight. As she reads, she notices Elena walking behind her and asserts that she desires nothing more, only to realize that the spellbook has disappeared. She sees Griselda holding it, and after several attempts to grab it, the book ends up falling on the other side of the room. Rosario reads that an agreement can be nullified if the Palo who made it places their blood on the Enga, sacrificing their soul to Cobayende. Murmuring, she reflects that her grandmother is already dead. With determination, she decides to imprison Cobayende in her grandmother's body. She grabs one of Griselda's jackets, collects some of her blood and hair, and begins to prepare for a ritual. As she looks at herself in the mirror, she questions her actions. Following the instructions in the spellbook, she begins the ritual. At this moment, she hears the wailing of an ambulance siren and speeds up her chanting. Marty informs her that the paramedics are on their way. She quickly blows out the candles and drags Griselda to hide her. When Rosario does not respond, Marty unlocks the door and finds the body on the couch. He goes to check the bedroom. While Rosario is hiding, Elena's ghost appears, and as she turns, he approaches her crawling. Rosario screams for help, and Elena states that Griselda has always been by her side, and now Rosario will be too. Elena begins to strangle Rosario. Marty pounds on the chamber door, and we see a cross in Elena's hand as she tries to kill Rosario. Suddenly, a paramedic's flashlight illuminates the chamber, allowing them to leave as Elena disappears. Rosario realizes that Griselda is no longer there. She exits and looks around, finding Griselda hanging from the ceiling. A train passes, making the apartment shake. Rosario looks at Griselda and tries to bring her down, but suddenly, Griselda falls onto her. Rosario puts on the jacket and continues the ritual. While reading from the spellbook, Griselda's mouth stretches and a hand begins to emerge, startling Rosario. But suddenly, that hand retracts. Elena then slams Rosario's head against the wall, knocking her unconscious. When the light returns, Rosario sees Elena in her human form. She arms herself with a knife in hand, while Elena claims that she truly is her mother. Elena reveals that she is proud of her and that the nightmare is over. Rosario expresses her regret for having abandoned both Elena and Griselda when she chose Oscar after the divorce, believing she could not move forward in life if she stayed with her mother and grandmother. Elena asserts that they always supported their daughter. Rosario mentions that when Elena fell ill, she felt great shame for showing up and hid while her mother died. Elena agrees, stating that she understands the situation and recalls that she and Oscar worked long hours at the factory, unable to return home without fear, stating that they did not want this for their daughter. She explains that they left that place in search of a better future, reaffirming their love for Rosario. They embrace, and then Elena gently instructs Rosario to close her eyes and repeat that she is a very selfish girl. Suddenly, Elena transforms into a demonic figure and growls that she risked everything to provide a better life for her daughter. Rosario manages to escape and runs, but just before she can close the door, Elena catches her. Rosario falls backward, breathless, and cries out what Elena wants from her. Elena replies that she wants Rosario to see. Dragging her across the floor, Elena takes her to witness her sacrifice. Moments of Rosario being transported to the past are seen, reliving her mother's migration when immigration officers come in. Chaos ensues, and people scatter. In the confusion, Elena gets caught in barbed wire. Nearby, she sees a man collapse, bloodied and gasping, who before dying hands her a cross. Then she hides as the officers search the area using flashlights. Returning to the present, Elena asserts that the grandmother and her father managed to pass through without difficulties, but that she suffered immensely. Rosario counters that Elena is not her mother, for she sacrificed herself out of love and was not deceitful like she is. Then she proceeds to say to Cobayende that she offers him eternity imprisoned in her grandmother's body. With this statement, Rosario pushes Elena, puts on the jacket and begins chanting the words from the book. Elena screams as she is drawn by Griselda's mouth. In an attempt to deceive Rosario, she asks for help, but Rosario remains steadfast, continuing to chant without hesitation until Elena is completely absorbed by Griselda's body. The next morning, Oscar arrives at the apartment and finds Rosario sitting in the same place she was the night before. He asks what happened, questioning her about the content of the book. She replies that it is a long story. She then notices that the mark on her hand has disappeared. Oscar then spots Elena's cross. Rosario expresses that her grandmother cared for her, to which Oscar replies that her mother also had that concern. Rosario reflects on the incredible pain and suffering she faced while crossing the border, stating that it was a horrible experience. Oscar asks how she can know, and she responds that she witnessed everything. He reveals that Elena was 3 months pregnant when they crossed, and that the guards separated them, which caused significant changes in her mother, resulting in her illness. She concludes that the ambulance is about to arrive. Together they recite a prayer for Griselda using the spellbook, and afterwards the paramedics take Griselda's body away. Rosario is seen flipping through an old photo album when Oscar finds the electric friar, confirming that Joe was right in his statements. In one of the photographs, Rosario notices blood on her father's fingers. Alarmed, she heads to her grandmother's room and finds Oscar's shirt outside the chamber. Upon entering, she confronts him directly, questioning him about the agreement he made. He laments that he never foresaw that the situation would reach this point, stating that it was at the time of her first communion and that she seemed full of hope. He wanted to provide the life he could not. Then, knowing that her grandmother practiced palo, learned from an old palo master, he broke into her chamber and made a wish on her Nga, but he was unaware of the price he would have to pay for it. He continues explaining that his grandmother found him and demanded that he leave, informing him that his mistake came with a price, a blood sacrifice to keep Kobe away. Griselda assured him that she would resolve the issue. Rosario realizes that her grandmother used that Nga to protect her from the agreement he established. Oscar mentions that Griselda always put her blood in that Nga every day. Rosario remembers the scars on Griselda's arms, stating that she kept that monster away until the day she died. Oscar then declares that he will now protect her. He then puts his blood in that Nga. Rosario remembers that if the person who made the agreement offers their blood, their body and soul will be sacrificed to Kobayenda, and she tries to stop him, but it is too late. Oscar transforms into a demon. Oscar drags the cauldron outside and suddenly begins to haunt her. He wields a knife and attacks her, making it difficult for her to react. He kicks her, turns on the stove, and attempts to burn her. Rosario reacts, tearing part of the skin from her cheek. Just when he is about to overpower her, Joe appears and strikes Oscar with a strong blow. Oscar recovers, retaliates against the attack, and mercilessly brings Joe's life to an end by breaking his neck. At this moment, Rosario stabs Oscar in the neck, causing him to fall onto the cauldron, impaled on the stakes that were there. As he dies, Oscar gestures with his hand, and Rosario murmurs the words, "May eternal love accompany you," and then he dies. 6 months later, it is revealed that Rosario opened a new firm aimed at helping underprivileged families. She is shown assisting Miguel and his wife with an investment. After they leave, Rosario lights a candle and recites a prayer, but suddenly, she begins to cough violently. The glass frame of the family photo starts to crack, the candle goes out, and a demonic hand bursts from her mouth.